So all learning design models, follow similar trajectory, right? You start with, identifying the problem, analyzing the situation you're at, knowing your students, and then move to then a design model and then develop and implement. And there are different variances in how linear that is, how much you're iterative, how much you're taking a human-centered design where you're doing rapid development cycles before you get to a final solution. Those are all variants of the same model. But what we were finding when we were working through those models is that first period, that analyze period, it wasn't clear what was happening in there for our stakeholders. And especially when we're working with our professional education partners, where time literally is money on their part, they want to get a product out the door quickly, but they also want to make a lot of money. They want the product to be effective, right? So there's this real tension there. Like, I don't want to spend a year in development, all those sunk costs, to put a product out there. I want to get something out in a couple of weeks, but I also want to get this high return. So we came up with the first piece of the 5D model, this discover period, as a way of explaining that what was happening in that analyze moment. And discover really, I think, is just a more clear word. We are discovering what the need is. We're discovering what the product could be. We're discovering what the market looks like. Drawing on work that is already happening from, say, a marketing perspective, that organization may already be doing, but folding that into the work. And really trying to make the value proposition to our partners that they want to have a product that's going to sell, that's going to be marketable, that's going to be powerful, that's going to engage learners. And how do we know that, right? So using some of the principles from design thinking, to do some prototyping, to do a lot of engagement with actual, in this case, consumers, but learners, to get their feedback, but still trying to keep that in a sort of tight framework that can't be open-ended. They have to make some decisions and move forward. But dedicating time to that discovery period and making clear that before we make any decisions about the product, this is necessary work. And then I think the other side of that 5D model, the debrief period, is just as important. To say, not just debriefing the product line, like, did it sell? It wasn't effective. How could it be improved? But also debriefing the process. What did we do along the way? How can we improve our processes? How can we improve our communication with stakeholders? What does the budget look like, both intended and realized? Those are all part of the debrief process that then helps us in the next project, become more efficient. I think the project that comes to mind is something we call internally SEAL, which is the Certificate for Early Education Leadership, which is a grant-funded project here at the education school. And this was a challenge because the idea of this project was to take all of this research into early education, how students develop from ages 1 to pre-K. What does the learning science say about the brain formation, and how can professionals who are working in that space take those principles in science and actually implement them? And why this is so challenging is that period there is very little formal education or certification for professionals working in that field. Many organizations are, mom and pop shops. There's no oversight from the State Board of Education. There's very little training that's many of the professionals in that space actually are required to take. So what we had to do in front of the design work is really think about who our audience is, what their needs are, what their challenges they face, and what would they value in a certificate program. This is not a degree program. It's not something that they need to get a job. So why would they take it? What would be of interest to them? So we did a lot of work around learner personas, a lot of work around focus groups, developing learner pathways. We created a sort of a standing board that could give us feedback on our models, and then created a series of really lightweight mock-ups and prototypes that we put in front of these audiences to give us feedback before we came up with what the structure of the certificate would look like. And it took 3 years to develop the certificate. It takes 1.5 years to go through it and complete it. So the 6 months of work we did in advance of that I think really paid off before we solidified the idea of what the product